is the 2007 Aston Martin V8 Vantage, featuring a 4.3-liter naturally aspirated V8 and a 6-speed manual transmission. Aston Martin's first attempt into an entry-level car certainly looks good. I'm Alex, your host, and join me for Test Drive V8 Vantage. For this test drive, we set out to answer one question. Given that this V8 Vantage was Aston Martin's first foray into a more affordable sports car, did they cut corners when designing and engineering the V8 Vantage that betrays Aston Martin's true driving heritage and feel? Or did you get a full-blown Bond car in a bargain wrapper with the V8 Vantage? The V8 that sits underneath this hood is good for 380 horsepower and 302 pound-feet of torque. That's good to get this V8 Vantage 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. The quarter mile passes by at 13.6 at 105 miles an hour. Top speed, 175 miles an hour for this Grand Tourer. When Aston Martin designed the V8 Vantage, everything they designed it around was not just to compete with one car, but to beat one car. And the car they had in mind was the absolute highest of targets, the Porsche Carrera S. So this is a 2007 Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Those of you who have been around long enough for the debut of this car may remember that for 20 years, it was actually Ford that owned Aston Martin as a boutique brand. That's right, so from 1987 to 2007, right before the financial crisis, Ford owned Aston Martin. And of course, doing Ford things, they wanted to try and squeeze as much out of the boutique brand as possible. So when they installed a new CEO, Ulrich Bez, at the beginning of 2000, he came up with the idea of developing an entry-level Aston Martin. And that was how the V8 Vantage was born. So the V8 Vantage came out on paper with a mid-engine design, but the accountants in economics wouldn't allow for a mid-engine Aston Martin, as all of their frames had a front-engine design and needed to share that characteristic for efficiencies of scale. Ford actually offered a 4.2-liter V8 that they were utilizing called the AJ V8 in their Jaguar brand. They offered it to Aston Martin, but Aston Martin said, not so fast. We have final say over the engine, and we want to massage that and put the Aston Martin touch on that 4.2-liter V8. So into Cologne, Germany slid British engineers. Aston Martin took up their own machining process, and essentially they went through and massaged that engine 0.1 liters up to 4.3 liters instead of 4.2. And that is where every one of these hand-built V8s that powered V8 Vantages from 2005 to 2017 came from. That factory right alongside other engineers in Cologne, Germany. The irony that a flagship British brand had an engine manufactured in Cologne, Germany, while being owned by an American car manufacturer is not lost on me. This thing has a lot of different heritage behind it.
Despite the fact that the V8 Vantage debuted way back at the 2003 Detroit Auto Show, there are some more modern technology elements behind its exhaust. It's an early active exhaust system. Below 2000 RPM, the valves within the exhaust remain closed, except for a few seconds upon startup for that signature bark. But when you push the engine past 4,000 RPM, those valves fully open up and let the exhaust breathe, really creating a hellacious roar. Now, it's not a setting that you have control over like on modern day vehicles. It is fully in the control of the V8 Vantage's computer, but I think the exhaust setup sounds phenomenal. What are your thoughts?
For every V8 Vantage, you had a choice of either a 6-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual, and the latter is definitely where you wanted to go. And that's not just my opinion, that's Aston Martin's opinion as well. The engineers developed this car around a 6-speed manual transmission. They wanted that engaging driving experience to really permeate the V8 Vantage. And that's why when Aston Martin actually set off to do their final tests on this car to see if it was up to their expectations, they spec'd it in manual. When you first enter the Aston Martin, the clutch does take a little bit getting used to. It's not that it's super heavy or difficult, it's just that it does have a long pull, but doesn't really grab until the very end of when you're letting out. So you do have the ability to make yourself look like a jackass a few times when you're first getting into this car. Oof. But once you get used to it, it's a very smooth transition, and this is a really easy to use clutch. I mean, you really do have to give your hats off to Aston Martin engineers for designing a car's driving experience around the manual transmission. Whereas if you look at our last test drive, the C8 Corvette, they don't even offer a manual transmission anymore. So it's really sad to see how engineers went from developing a car around that third pedal experience to foregoing it altogether, even in the heftiest of sports cars. Brakes are fairly straightforward on this Aston Martin. No carbon ceramic options. All you have is 14-inch steel rotors that are ventilated and slotted up front and 13 inches in the rear. 4 piston calipers are going to clamp down and stomp on those rotors to bring you to a halt. Obviously, with steel rotors, not something intended for track use, so again, fitting the Grand Touring image very well. The suspension's not real fancy for this Aston Martin. No, there was only one suspension, and it was double wishbone up front and double wishbone in the back, both with anti-roll bars and monotone dampers. The monotone dampers have a good feel to it. It's more sporty than certainly track. The entire setup from suspension to braking feel, all of that is much more geared towards touring with this V8 Vantage. If you watched our last video with the C8 Corvette, you may recall that Corvette engineers went on a full soapbox about why 50-50 weight distribution is overblown and you should really go for 40-60. Well, Aston Martin engineers never got that memo 2 decades ago because they aimed for this to be as close to 50-50 as possible. For the V8 Vantage, you have 49% of weight sitting on this front axle and the other 51% sitting on the rear. Near perfect weight distribution. I will say, while maybe the ride is not the most comfy, this is a very planted, solid cornering car. You have a lot of confidence whenever you're going into any turn. You know, talking back to this car debuting in the 2003 Detroit Auto Show, it gives you the notion that this car's old, and it is. But the inside, while it certainly doesn't have any modern conveniences or electronics, I've got to say has aged fairly well. I love the dark leather here. There are some cracks and fades in it, but it kind of looks like a beat up briefcase or something like that. Still handsome. And while absolutely nobody is blown away by the aesthetic design here, I do have to say that I think all in all, for not having an infotainment screen, it's held up pretty well.
Well, that's not entirely true. Remember that clicking sound earlier?
So before I give too much grief to the dated interior, in this vehicle there was supposed to be a screen. Matter of fact, it was supposed to be right here. See, that would have been where a pop-up nav would have been. Would it have been relevant still in 2025? Absolutely not. But the owner went ahead and decided to disable it anyways, perhaps saving him from the pop-up. But I always say I like to test these cars as close to stock as possible, so it's disappointing to see that they had ripped out the nav. So one thing that I've really loved and something that we've been on a hot streak of is that we've been getting our hands on cars that have really good audio systems. And again, when you have like a Grand Tour or you're trying to enjoy long road trips, I think that having a great audio system is essential. Well, it wasn't when this Aston Martin V8 Vantage was produced. This V8 Vantage has a 6-speaker, 140-watt Lin audio system. This car was born definitely before home electronics had really grown. Something else kind of unique is that the doors, because this sits so low, don't swing directly out where you could crunch into some low-hanging curb. They actually go up and out. Take, for example, my chin is above this piece right here. Well, when I open it, it swings out pretty considerably. It is now above my head that much. So it doesn't swing up like a butterfly door, but it will swing out and up enough just to save the very bottom of your door from maybe hitting a curb, rocks, or something of that nature. You know, what we're doing here is really what this car was designed for. It is a Grand Tourer, right? Like, this is not the car that you take to the track and have a field day with it. This is the car that you get in and you take a long road trip. It's supposed to have ample room for baggage, good cruising, and usually a big V8. And this thing has at least 2 of those 3 things.
Okay, I throw this next part in there because of my own struggles with baggage in the V8 Vantage, yet finding in their brochure, they brag about luggage space.
If you own this car, you might want to be single or at least travel light if you're going with a companion, because there is not ample room for more than 1 checked bag, admittedly, in the rear trunk. So it may be very 007 Bond-esque, but you probably want to travel light or remain single while you're in this car if you're going on a long road trip. Let's talk styling of the undeniably beautiful V8 Vantage. The design is timeless. The low swept-back look, the beautiful hood, it's very Aston Martin-esque. The person that you have to thank is, of course, the head of design during the time that this V8 Vantage was put in. And it's a name that you may be familiar with. Henrik Fisker. That's right. That Henrik Fisker, the EV1. He was the head of design for Aston Martin from 2001 to 2005, and as a result, 2 very classic, beautiful Aston Martins are directly under his design. The V8 Vantage you see here, and the DB9 of the time, both timeless classics. How you went from designing one of the most beautiful, elegant cars in the world, this, to designing, well, this, is beyond me.
Well, maybe there's something there. Ian Callum, the head of design at Aston Martin before Fisker, and the man responsible for the iconic Vanquish, questioned Fisker's involvement. In a 2010 interview done with Car and Driver, Callum said that 100% of the DB9 and 80% of the V8 Vantage's design were done under his watch before Fisker joined the company.
One fun fact about its dimensions, even though you see this long, low hood, this car is actually 2 inches shorter than a Porsche Carrera. So it is a very compact Aston Martin, even though it has that long look to it. Oh my God. I don't know if you'll even be able to hear any of this. We're in the middle of 7 extreme weather warnings where I'm recording. Well, if there's one thing to respect, it's that this Aston Martin's no garage queen. At almost 80,000 miles and going through an atmospheric river that's really limiting our ability to get outside shots, this car is living the life.
And even after all these years, the V8 Vantage still catches the eye of a lot of onlookers.
How much would you sell it to me?
I don't own it.
Oh, you don't know?
Nope, just doing a video on it. Whether or not the V8 Vantage was a success really isn't up for debate. With 25,000 units sold from 2005 to 2017, it is Aston Martin's most successful car. And more meaningfully, it came at the perfect time. Aston Martin was struggling to remain a brand because of how low volume all their cars were.
And that's genuinely not an exaggeration. Throughout its history, Aston Martin has gone bankrupt an absurd 7 times. So the higher production V8 Vantage before its end in 2017 was definitely a success.
Now, I say the V8 Vantage nameplate went extinct, and it did, as far as Aston Martin's concerned. The name V8 Vantage did end in 2017, while the Vantage continued. And how that happened was basically Aston Martin entered into a new partnership with AMG. That same AMG that's synonymous with Mercedes-Benz and performance, All the Vantages that were produced from then on have been produced with the twin-turbo 4.0-liter V8 from AMG that is truly phenomenal, but what you gained in performance, you maybe lost a little bit in touch. A lot of people say that you really lost some feel in the chase of track performance. After all, the naturally aspirated V8 that we have here is not what you're getting from that twin-turbo soundtrack that the AMG folks are using in the new Aston Martin. So the era of this being a Grand Tourer kind of died when they went to that forced induction twin-turbo setup for the new Vantage. So I mentioned that as far as competition goes, Aston Martin saw the Porsche Carrera S as their ultimate competitor. But I think that it's reasonable to throw in a few different cars into that comparison. Take, for example, its British cousin, the Jaguar XKR. Yes, they use a very similar base engine but supercharge it, but it's got that same big body Cooper convertible feel, luxury, big V8, big touring feel. Now, how about an Italian competitor? Well, how about the Maserati Grand Sport, which was developed when Ferrari had 100% control of Maserati. Ugly as hell though. You want to bring in German competition? Well, how about the Mercedes SL 550 or the BMW 650i? Again, none of these are the top performance trims of their brand. None of those cars are ones that you really want to take to the track, but every one of those cars are cars that you would love to drive the countryside in, love to open up on an empty highway. And that's what the Grand Touring mentality is about. So did Aston Martin develop a Porsche Carrera S killer? No, not really. This thing trails the Carrera S in acceleration, braking, handling, and price is frankly closer to a Porsche Turbo than a Porsche Carrera S. In their pursuit of that though, they developed something amazing and something completely different from the Porsche experience. So what are some of the positives behind the V8 Vantage? I think the first positive is just how the combination of this V8 and that 6-speed manual transmission makes you feel. It truly is a driver's car, and Aston Martin did a great job engineering basically a muscle car out of this Aston Martin V8 Vantage. As I said, when they put this through its final specifications test to see if it met their own benchmarks, they equipped it with a manual transmission. And that is truly the spirit that they wanted you to drive this car in. They wanted an engaging driving experience. It was never about straight line performance with this Aston Martin. It was about how it made you feel. And this car does a great job of making you feel. I'd be remiss if we didn't highlight a positive, just the gorgeous, timeless, ageless beauty that this Aston Martin has. You know, we were talking about some of the competitors to this. I think this car aged maybe the best out of those 5 cars we mentioned. I mean, look at the Maserati Grand Sport. It is ugly as hell. And the BMW 650i really didn't inspire any good looks either. But this and the Jaguar and the Porsche, I think are really timeless classics. And I don't think all of the competition that this car had could say the same thing. Another positive, I think, is the soundtrack that this Aston Martin produces. A relatively simple and straightforward 4.3-liter V8, but this does have some technology in the exhaust. As we talked about, it's an early active exhaust feature, nothing that you can control, and again, make this thing really sound like a bona fide muscle car. So on the other side, what are some of the negatives or drawbacks behind the V8 Vantage? All right, one negative, let's give it to the 6-speaker, 140-watt audio system that this Aston Martin features. I mean, I know it's entry level and you had to cut costs somewhere, but a 140-watt audio system is just pathetic. If you pull out one of your Bose speakers, your JBL speakers now, it's going to have better sound quality than the 6 speakers that survive in this Aston Martin. Another negative, while the handling and the weight distribution of this car is fantastic, the actual ride itself is more on the sport side than the comfort side. Maybe it is because this is a 2.5-decade-old suspension, but when you see potholes or uneven terrain coming, brace for it because you're going to feel it. And maybe it is just because we had the Chevy Magnetic Ride Control 4.0 on the Cadillac and the Corvette that we just test drove, but I'm definitely missing those adaptive dampers, and these monotube dampers that they use here aren't going to save your back when you're heading for a pothole. One negative that I think you absolutely have to be able to say is that it came for the king and missed. Right? Like, it went for the Porsche Carrera S with the intent not just of competing, but beating the Carrera S, and it came up short. in speed, handling, braking, but in pursuit of the Carrera, which is a admittedly lofty goal, I think they found something special, something different, and something unique. And that's that V8 coupled with the 6-speed manual transmission that's just a different visceral experience compared to the Porsche. At the beginning of this test drive, we set out to answer one question. Put simply, with this being Aston Martin's first foray into a more entry-level car, did they cut corners and deliver an experience that's not worthy of Aston Martin? Or did you get a full-blown Bond car in a bargain wrapper? My answer? This is a badass Bond car that even 007 would want to have in his arsenal. That 4.3-liter V8 mated with the 6-speed manual transmission is something that dreams are made of. They don't make Grand Tours like this in this day and age. This is truly a relic from a bygone era. No, all the things that make this Aston Martin so great aren't the fact that it's so quick from 0 to 60, or that it stops on a dime, that it turns on rails. No, the thing that makes this V8 Vantage so special is how it makes you feel. It's that V8 coupled with that 6-speed manual transmission that you just don't see anymore. Think about it, the C8 that we just test drove doesn't even offer a manual transmission anymore. No, this literally was one of the last of its kind big V8 in a small coupe touring experiences, something that was just meant for you to feel, not necessarily hit the track in. So what do you think? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What were your favorite features of the V8 Vantage? Do you agree with me that it's a timeless classic? Or do you take a look at some of the performance and horsepower figures and say, this car doesn't measure up to modern standards? Would you rather have the naturally aspirated V8 Vantage or the twin turbo V8 that's now powering the new generation of Vantages produced by AMG? Let me know in the comments below. So if you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you hit like. And if you enjoy what we're doing in these videos, I suggest you subscribe, because we're gonna be trying to get our hands on more cars that make you feel like this V8 Vantage. If you made it to the end of the video, we appreciate the hell out of you. I'm Alex, your host, and I'll see you on the next test drive.